Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy's Trail Expert Network. Our topic today is trail use and maintenance during the COVID-19 pandemic. I have a couple specific questions that RTC has prepared for our panelists, and so I'm going to go through those. And we see that some of you have been typing in your own questions. That's wonderful. Please keep those coming, and so we'll have those teed up once we're done with our questions. So for all four of you, you all addressed this in your intros, but just does anyone, before we get into other specifics, does anyone have anything else they didn't get to say yet about specific things you're doing to address challenges associated with extreme crowding? Because I think that's the big, that's the big concern, especially on the more urban, popular trails, especially on the weekends. Did anyone want to jump in and say anything else about just the challenge you're dealing with, or ideas, or things you're thinking about when it comes to managing that crowding that's been happening?
I can take a stab at that. One of the things that, in addition to our signs and our messaging, we haven't done yet, but just in the interest of brainstorming across like-minded agencies, one of the things we're talking about doing is one of the places we're seeing crowding is at intersections, and a lot of our paved trails have, in some cases, long light cycles, so people are kind of bunching up. So one of my colleagues, our section chief, had the idea of going out. She may do this next week, is take chalk and do 6-foot circles to let people know what that radius looks like. So when they're bunching up at the intersections, people can kind of be a little bit more aware of what 6 feet looks like, and how far back they'd have to space, possibly even going back down the trail a little bit to give that proper distance. So I think trying to think outside the box and kind of low infrastructure, quick ways to help communicate what we're dealing with. That's the kind of thing we're thinking about.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to jump in on anything else to add on the managing crowding, or anything you're thinking about with that?
I think one of the things we're doing, I mean, we're also doing signage and that kind of thing, and social media is all over the place. But I think the message we're trying to give to people, especially because our governor, like you, all of your governors have said, is nature's open and they're actually encouraging the parks. It's a great opportunity for us to actually highlight how parks help our mental and physical health. But we also have a campaign going about nature is open. And that is not just about trying to send people to our parks. It's also a campaign about how you can get outside in your neighborhood or in your backyard, and just trying to encourage people about the benefits of the outdoors, and that you can find the outdoors right outside your front door. And I think marketing is a real key in this. Everyone's pretty glued to their phones and media. And so there's a great opportunity to really have a voice there to try and help people understand, especially if they have fears about going out in public spaces, of how they can still utilize the outside.
Excellent, thank you, Amy. Anybody else want to jump in on this one? If not, I have a quick thought. When we put out our survey to trail managers in the wake of the pandemic, which I hope all of you listening in who are trail managers will fill out our survey. One person wrote in that they had taken away like anything that they could that was not fixed permanently near a trailhead, like took away benches, took away anything else to not allow people to I guess people were congregating, a lot of people are congregating around trailheads. And so anything they could kind of do so that people weren't at least able to crowd and congregate around the physical trailhead itself. And also have been hearing a lot about, and I think some of you on the call might be able to jump in on closing of parking lots as well, if anyone wants to jump in on the parking lot issue.
Well, I'll jump in on that. I was going to mention that. Thanks, Liz. Is that, yeah, the challenge is finding this balance for us right now, where we want to provide that for the public. It's what we do. It's the message we've been giving: healthy parks, healthy people. That we want people to come visit our parks, but at the same time, not over promote them. so that you get these massive crowds coming in. And that's really all we have the power to close is those staging areas. We've said, you know, don't touch benches, don't go to picnic areas. We have botanic gardens we've closed, rental facilities, all bathrooms. And then now it's looking like staging areas, major parking areas into the parks. And I think lastly, I'll say that the challenge that I think every one of us is dealing with, but I'll just give verbiage to here, is that I'm not sure how serious the general public is taking this. And as we see the cases rise, people sort of say, oh, gee, this is important. But in a world in the last 3 years where we've sort of not really trusted our government so much in our messaging, that I think people think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. So that's what we're challenged with right now. And then trying to make signs and get the word out through social media, our website, and press releases with minimal staff to do so. So I know we're all there, but that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing, I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for calling it out. I think that's spot on. Okay, so we have a couple RTC questions for each of you that I'm going to ask. So I'm going to start with Gabe. So tell us, Gabe, anything else you want to add in terms of what we were just talking about with the crowding? How has your communications and kind of outreach, you know, what have you done specifically, since you're a communications and community engagement specialist? How have you been using that sector of the work to really guide and steer people in the ways you need to?
Yeah, so I'm lucky to have a pretty tight team of in our communications team. I'm actually within the business development and partnerships team, and the communications team within that. And so initially, when this all sort of dropped, we started a task force, a response working group that could set up a clear chain of command and try to make timely responses to public inquiry. There's a lot of nuance to what's happening around here. You know, initially it's fairly easy to close, you know, our aquatic center, for example, but much harder to close the 215 miles of backcountry trails that we have. So, you know, those rapidly evolving situations calls for quickly vetted decisions. And one of the first things that we did was we started a blog post and started pushing everybody to that blog post. And like Darren mentioned, just time stamping everything, letting people know that when those decisions came out and when they were made and what the changes were, because it's difficult. You know, we've seen, even though we're in one of those hot spots, like Sean, we're seeing a massive use of our trails, backcountry trails, regional trails. So it's been hard to get people to maintain that social distance that they should to slow this virus down. And everybody from our staff in the field, they've been concerned, and so we're just trying to get information out internally and externally as quickly as possible. Has been really helpful. One of the tools we've used internally is Slack. We've been using Slack for a while, but it's a great tool that really makes us feel connected, as well as be able to talk in real time very quickly. So it's been helpful.
Thanks, Gabe. And I saw the blog posts you guys did encouraging people to go to the lesser used trails and less famous trails. And I thought that was so great. So Amy, I've got a question for you. You're part of a 340-mile plus network of trails. And so it's not just your organization, you know, there's other jurisdictions, other organizations. How has this pandemic enabled, or, you know, how are you coordinating and strategizing with those other jurisdictions in your regional trail network?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, there's about 12 trail managing agencies throughout that whole system. You know, we're really blessed in Southwest Ohio with a lot of different parks around us. So we manage 16,000 acres in our area, but there's adjacent parks in every direction to us. And so we have our metropolitan planning organization, Miami Valley Regional Planning Organization. They maintain the Miami Valley Trails website. And so there's been conversation with all those trail managers about what decisions they're making for trail amenities and where they are with restrooms and other types of amenities. I expect that conversation to continue as we all are moving into a deeper level of having conversations about public spaces like benches and areas that people are going to touch. It's a humongous burden because we aren't really made for storing those kinds of things everywhere. But the consistency there throughout our region is that we're all on the same page about access to restrooms. Some throughout our region still have limited access to portalets. Our agency just today was making a decision that we're going to remove those from our spaces. So we're moving in that direction. We're also starting to, some in the our neighbors have heard from portalet companies that they're no longer servicing. And so that becomes a problem as well. I think some of the conversations as we start to get out of triage mode for making decisions about the health of the public and the health of our staff is really how do we work together to create similar messaging and speaking to constituents about being respectful about those spaces and knowing that those are places for them. Some of our districts have seen, unfortunately, users not deal well with closed restrooms, and they've been sabotaging or vandalizing the spaces that are closed. We've seen people, with public indecency throughout the system, not a lot, but a little bit. And then that just exposes other people that have to clean those spaces up. So we've been communicating virtually, and I expect that to continue.
Thank you so much, Amy. For Sean, I wanted to ask you in terms of, you're not completely separate from the other 5 counties that are part of the shutdown in your region and the Bay region. So are you seeing any kind of spillovers, when a hotspot is closed, maybe outside of the park district? Is there more use where you're at, or even within the park district's jurisdiction? If you close a hotspot, do you see more use go up in another, area? Kind of how is it playing out from your perspective?
Thanks for that. Yeah. The quick answer is we'll see this weekend. We're just now announcing closure of about 30 of our 73 parks are affected by some closure. We'll see. We're right now we have our GIS team working on a proximity to of our parks that are going to be affected by a closure to rural or to urban areas and residences and things. We're kind of getting set up right now to see what happens. We have 33 cities within the park district, and I should have mentioned this earlier. We're a 2-county park district. We're a special district in California, in Alameda and Contra Costa County, right next to the San Francisco Bay, right? So I saw that question come up on the right. I said, I forgot to mention that. So yeah, the answer is we'll see, but I'm not sure how I can, we'll probably post that on our website or something, but I can follow up with you on that if you'd like.
Oh, it's great to know that your GIS team is looking at that. I think that part of the answer is worth its weight in gold. And I'd love to follow up with you about how you all are tracking that.
We've also, as you mentioned before, we have about 50 automated trail counters on our regional trails, mostly on our paved network. We have about 150 miles or more of that. And I concur with the results that you're finding or that you've reported. Was it looks like the average doubled within the first week of the shelter-in-place order. Wow. And so I am watching that as well to see if there's any trends that change. Many of those counters have to be the data has to be uploaded by a physical staff member, and we're on limited staff right now, so some of that's hard to get. But so we're watching, and we'll continue to make management decisions and changes as we see fit, depending on the reaction.
Thank you so much, Darren, or Sean. Appreciate that answer. Darren, Montgomery County, for those who aren't familiar, Montgomery County has over 1 million people in it, I believe. So, so you're working for a big park agency with a lot of staff. So how is Montgomery County Parks Department addressing the safety of the maintenance and cleaning staff right now?
Yeah, well, I can speak for our kind of operations and our trails crew. Well, first of all, everyone that can telework is encouraged to telework, so there's that. I think that's probably universal. We have also provided all of our staff with 40 hours of social distancing leave as things come up with family or other issues where people just aren't going to be as available. Now, I will say that 40 hours, depending on how long this stretches out, could go pretty quickly for a lot of folks, but it's something that we're trying to provide flexibility to our staff to the extent possible. And then we're also thinking about things like, for the folks that are working in the field, we've encouraged our trails crew, for example, to drive separate vehicles to locations in the field where they're going to, not to share vehicles. We're kind of relaxing flexibility where folks can drive from home to trail locations instead of meeting at their headquarters. So things like that, and really just focusing on allowing people to be as flexible, focusing on getting the projects done in whatever sort of time people need to work, and providing people as much support to keep the social distancing, and so we're not putting our staff at risk. I'm sure that's something that everybody's dealing with.
Great. Thank you so much, Darren. And back to Gabe. How can other agencies be more prepared for what could be a similar experience that King County has really been one of the first urban counties, pretty hard hit. So for those places in the country who are, a week or two behind you in the pandemic, but maybe dealing with this, what can they do to prepare from a trail use and trail management and communications perspective? Did we lose Gabe? I think we lost Gabe. Okay, well, hopefully Gabe will dial back in. So let's see. I will go to Amy. Amy, have you had to create specialized messaging based on different trail types? Like I mentioned earlier, you're managing a lot of different trail types, multi-use, mountain bike, equestrian, water. So how are you dealing with that in the wake of the pandemic?
No, we're not creating special messaging for the individual users. I think the message is the same for everyone. We are blessed in our park district that we don't, other than our paved trail system, we do separate user groups, and that does help kind of delineate people in general directions. But the messaging is the same, right? Be cognizant of social distancing, maintain that 6-foot distance, and be respectful out there. But for sure, utilize trails in nature. Similar to what Darren said, we have pinch points on certain trails where that does become difficult for people to give the space they need. We had a large influx yesterday. We had a beautiful day. It was 65 degrees and sunny. So there were a lot of people after a week and a half of being cooped up that were ready to get outside. And some people are being very, very open and about trying to step aside and showcase that, and I think another thing that's important is to encourage those users when you're out as a worker, you know, smile at people, say hi. We can still talk to each other. You know, I think we forget that sometimes. You know, everybody's taking this so serious, but generally speaking, our messaging is the same. And the other thing that we're really lucky on is that our marketing staff has a great rapport with our local reporters. And so we have gotten a lot of different types of media in the last 2 weeks. We've had lots of publications, and you know, they're looking for good positive news stories as well, and how to use the outside, which is normal for spring anyway. And so that's one way we're doing it. The other thing is that some of our staff are creating videos and how-tos on different skill sets or just how to utilize our trailheads. And so those are going out on social media, and eventually we'll post them on our website or through YouTube or something like that as well. So we're organizing that way.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then one more RTC question, and then we're going to move on to the audience's questions. So for Darren, is the Parks Department anticipating that there are planned improvements or construction or even planning processes that you're going to have to delay or even cancel in light of the pandemic?
Yeah, certainly delay. All of our public meetings are canceled. A lot of meetings are still happening over video conference, but in terms of public outreach, that's put a hinder on our planning. So things will get delayed. I don't know that things will necessarily get canceled. From a natural surface trails construction standpoint, we've shifted entirely towards maintenance of our trails rather than new construction. We were about to undertake a couple of major natural surface trail projects. Those are certainly on hold for the time being as we focus on making sure that our trails are traversable and safe. To that end, one of the things that our trails crew, which is sort of a separate unit inside our park planning and stewardship division, is we are shifting resources from in that crew to our parks operation crew, so that as requests come down to remove downed trees and things like that, that's shifting to our trails crew rather than the parks managers who would typically deal with those, to try and lighten the load on our operations crew, which is being stretched thin right now. Obviously, we're canceling our volunteer events. So there are, we're calling audibles and we're making adjustments as needed while still trying to push forward to the extent possible.
Thank you so much. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Oberg on my team. He's our Stellar Midwest Regional Director, and he has curated some of your questions in advance. In addition, he's working with our team behind the scenes to gather your questions you've been inputting in the chat box. So Eric, take it away with the audience questions.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to all you panelists. And I'll be hitting you up here in a second. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in, and a special thank you to those of you that sent some questions in early. I'm going to start with a couple of those that we were able to curate from the questions that you sent in over the last couple of days as you were registering for the webinar. And a couple of them that I'm just going to answer with some RTC resources. So these can go fairly quickly, and we'll move back to getting the panelists to give us some more of their insights. But Sarah from North Carolina was asking about what can we do to continually advocate for trail funding in a way that's respectful of the needs to divert funds because of this pandemic issue. You can see the slide I'm sharing with you now. I mean, the first thing, help us help you, right? Let RTC try to be an aggregator of the needs and what you have, some of your ideas. The stimulus bill that just went through will not be the last piece of stimulus legislation. Our policy team is collecting case studies and shovel-ready projects. Understand that shovel-ready right now is being defined as 3 years. If you've got some of these, you can look at the existing ones at the URL on the screen. You can contact Mary Ellen. You can see her email there with your trail and active transportation projects. There's a lot of expectation that there will be some sort of infrastructure stimulus package, and we need to make sure, especially with this conversation happening now, right, the demand's never been higher, and that's not going to necessarily wane. So there is still a way to be advocating for critical funding for the kinds of work that everybody is doing and will need to continue to do, maybe now more than ever. So please get in touch with the policy team here so we can have a good, robust package ready for the Hill. Another really good question came in from George in Texas. How can trail and park organizations in communities throughout America create consistent messaging regarding safe trails, park, and green space use? We've got some Share the Trail resources at Rails to Trails Conservancy. You can go to railstotrails.org/COVID-19 and access some of this. I'm actually going to another question that came in real time here that I think is apropos here. If we've still got Gabe on with us, or I'm sorry, Darren, if you're still on, there were folks asking about some of your signage that we showed, and is that available for others to use? So if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot with that specific question.
Yeah, no problem. We would be happy to share it. I've shared it with Liz and given her the green light to share that with folks. It's not currently on our website, and I think we can get that up as soon as possible. So I'll talk to my communications team about that. But broadly, yeah, we'd be happy to share it. Obviously, it has our logo, so feel free to customize. And then just another note on the messaging is, we're trying to be consistent with our messaging from the CDC and so forth. So as things change, obviously our message will have to change. In the event that we do change any policies about being open and accessible, our message will have to change. So going back to the timestamp comment, as of right now, that's our messaging, and we'd be happy to share it.
Thank you. Eric, I just want to jump in and just tell everyone, breaking RTC update, that the Share the Trail graphic you see on the screen, we're about to have that ready in Spanish as well. So we'll have that up in Spanish for everyone to grab and use.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you, Gabe. One other question here, and I'm going to invite my fellow RTC colleague, Brandy Horton, is going to take a stab at this one. And I think I might ask Amy a little bit around event coordination. We had a couple questions, and this is this is very complex, I think, right now. And I know it's difficult for so many of our partners, especially maybe some of our nonprofit partners. I'm going to read both questions and we'll try to tackle them together. Is it ethical to ask for donations if our organization is not life and safety oriented, yet still impacted by event cancellation? Many of you that registered, I recognized being leadership of small nonprofit organizations. This is very real. Another question here, how can we hold any sort of fundraising bike rides or events under current conditions? Obviously, there is registration tables, SAG stops, other things associated even with trail events that are going to concentrate people. Is there a way to do this, and what does it mean to deal with events or not deal with events right now? Brandy, do you want to chime in first?
Sure. Thanks, Eric, very much. And this is a complicated series of questions, and a complicated series of questions we've been trying to answer at RTC for the last few weeks. And the guidance that we're following and that we're sharing with others is it is absolutely appropriate to fundraise in this moment, as long as you're doing it in a way that takes into consideration the current context, right? I think what we've all shared on this call is that trails are proving to be absolutely critical and essential in this moment. We didn't know in the beginning how that would look, and as people were getting shelter-in-place orders and social distancing recommendations, what that would look like. And what we're learning is that the outside is more important right now than probably it's ever been before. Everyone is starting to realize what we've always known, that these spaces are exceptionally critical to communities. And so there is a really important place, I think, here for us to be sharing that message, to be sharing it responsibly in accordance with the appropriate guidelines from local public health officials and the CDC, but to also be able to let people know that the way that these places are maintained, the way that we are able to make these places available is because of organizations like all of ours that are gathering together here. And so doing it in a way that is just sensitive and thoughtful, I think, is really appropriate. When it comes to events, we would not advise at this time that anyone plan any in-person gatherings. That would be even if it is your most important fundraising event of the year, think about when and how you could reschedule that for a later time in the year. We have seen folks do really creative things where they've made an event, virtual, and they've said, we usually do this ride, but instead, pledge to do something and use that as the fundraising angle, especially because a lot of the folks who participate in those events know just how important they are to your organization and they support your organization. So they're going to want to contribute now how they can. We are currently not planning any events. We've canceled opening day for trails at this point in terms of the events. Nationally, we are not making any plans beyond starting kind of looking at May and June and July. We'll start to share with folks when we're going to do events once that guidance is clear. So we would really advise against any in-person events at this moment.
Thank you, Brandy. Anybody else have anything to chime in? I know most of you are probably in the same boat. You're certainly not hosting events, but any advice for these organizations whose lifeblood has been events?
It's really hard, and I think it's especially hard on the small business people and the race organizers out there. And I think we need to remind our constituents that the folks that are doing those, we've canceled all our outside permitted events as well as our own in the near future, at least through May 3rd at this point. And those are hard decisions, but we have to follow the CDC guidelines, and we have to follow the guidelines and ordinances from our governors. And I think that sometimes we forget to remind the public that some of those race organizers that had to close, they've already spent that money, and they've bought the t-shirts, and even though the event didn't happen, they might not have the money to return it back to the user. And I think all event organizers are trying to find creative ways to give that back to the user, but I just think it's important for us to remind when we're talking to the public to remind them to be gracious on those kinds of decisions. These aren't things we want to do, but there are things that we must do, and I think that we're all eager to get back to business as usual as soon as possible, right? I mean, it's our livelihood. But I just think that's an important thing. And I don't think at this point in time that under the guidelines that we're under, that it is possible to host an event on a trail, even if you're spreading people out. There's just too many parameters that come into play with that.
Thank you, Amy. I've got a question. This is actually from Ojai, California, and I think it's maybe most appropriate for our California and Washington panelists, you guys that are in the real hotspots right now with some pretty firm shelter-in-place orders. How are you dealing with staff who were or should be doing some critical project work right now that's maybe timely and can only, do you have critical trail work, and can it be done solo with appropriate social distancing, but it's contrary to the government's stay-at-home rules? Has there been any way that you've been able to get creative trail work done, as well as just maintenance? The question here is a little bit around opportunity. With parks closed, are you able to safely have park staff do maintenance that's hard to do when they're filled with people?
I'll jump in there, Eric.
Right.
Thanks for the question. I think it's unfortunate, but given what right now, let's say there is not an opportunity for like trail maintenance or sort of routine yearly maintenance to be happening, because what I'm hearing is most of like the park supervisors and staff in the field are running around trying to manage the parks with less people right now. Unfortunately, we have so many trails that we have a hard time getting to them when we're fully staffed. There are like in California, there is obviously the high threat of wildfire season, and that is coming. And so as this shelter in place order starts to blend in with fire season, we have a huge challenge on our hands, especially if the power goes out. And not to mention if a fire starts, how do you evacuate and deal with that while there's a shelter-in-place order? But those types of activities like brush clearing, tree trimming, fire break work, those are essential, and those are continuing in our district. But a lot of the things, you have to define essential and critical with given the context right now. That I can tell you without a doubt is essential and critical. But clearing a down tree over a trail or putting in some drainage, type things like drain dips and things like that are kind of out of the question right now.
Excellent, thank you. I'm actually going to combine, this is fun. We're getting these real-time questions during the webinar, as well as some of the questions that were curated beforehand, and some of them have some very nice tie-ins together. So I'm going to combine one I wanted to ask from before with one that just came in. And this is coming from a place of a lot of friends groups, a lot of supportive nonprofits to our public agency, park and trail management agencies are involved in this webinar and certainly involved in everybody's work on a daily basis. And they're asking if there's ways they can still be of service. How can they help? We've got a question about, is there a way that those organizations can help larger municipal park and trail management agencies with any sort of maintenance tasks that you are doing on short staff? Is there any way for them to continue helping? Is there a way for them to be some of your liaisons at hotspots that are not closed, at your trailheads, to remind people of some of these new social distancing rules and the way that some of your recommended, the new ways to safely use your parks? Are there ways for these groups to still help you both with physical maintenance or helping you with crowd, I don't want to say crowd control, but etiquette and things like that at trailheads?
I'll jump in for a minute on that. We're fortunate enough to have groups like this and several volunteer groups. The Dayton Hikers have, I think they're up to almost 5,000 volunteers. Our agency has over 2,000. And for the most part, we've halted a lot of our official volunteer work, especially with trail construction and maintenance. The longer this shelter in place goes into place, could impact that. It's obviously going to make it longer for us to function and get back ahead of things. But I think one thing that our volunteer groups are doing, a lot of them have meetup group websites and that kind of thing, and they're helping cater the message, right? They're helping to pass that along. I'm not sure we're in a place at the very moment where they can help physically on the trail, but I do think that it is a place where they can help carry the message and reach more people than we're reaching that are following our sites. And another thing that I just want to throw out there, because I think we're in a unique place to do it. And this is kudos. We have a law enforcement division, and so kudos to our law enforcement for actually bringing this up. But we, as a lot of people have older volunteers, and they're in that kind of compromised immune group, we did offer, because law enforcement continues to be essential for us. We've sent messaging to them about our cancellations, but we've also sent the message that for once we'd like to give back to them, and if we can help by running to the grocery store or delivering items to them, that we would like to do that. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there, because I think it is a unique opportunity for us to actually give back to our volunteers.
That's great.
I just want to, Eric, I just want to know, great question. I think we should all be asking the question, right now, how can we help? And I agree with Amy's answer, which is for us, we've canceled all our events, and we wouldn't encourage folks to go out and do any maintenance right now, but to be ready, because we know that when things open back up and things are lifted, we're going to have a lot of needs stacked up. So if you can just keep that spirit and keep that sort of generous attitude towards, sometime down the line, we will all be calling on you. So thank you very much for that offer.
So true. No, that's a great point. Darren, maybe I'll direct this one to you because you are so close to such a large metro area. I know some of the rest of you are as well, but I know this is a concern for maybe places that aren't metro centric, but they're very close. And you did talk about, and we showed your map highlighting where trailheads and access points for your trail network is. And we got a question from another place that is certainly not metro-centric, but it is a destination, Houghton, Michigan. And the question was, some trails are concerned and some communities are seeing a massive influx of out-of-town visitors because they want to get out of the city and go take a walk or go take a hike, and it's exacerbating this crowding issue, whereas shelter, if you could get that, you can step out your front door and take a walk or a hike and try to concentrate use where you are. Any thoughts on how to mitigate that, or have you seen messaging around that issue, and any advice for people that are seeing that influx in smaller jurisdictions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we haven't seen, we've seen way lower than normal metro ridership just in the system in general. And so it's not an issue that I am specifically aware of. I mean, I think the general question of our down county metro accessible trails being more heavily used than normal, and then our up county trails that are further off the public transportation, but also just outside of the population centers. We are seeing that. So I think our general messaging is to disperse folks away from those high population areas closer to the city, and just encourage people to think outside of the box of their normal trails. So for example, in the Washington, D.C. area, the Capitol Crescent Trail is always crowded, and it certainly is now. So really trying to encourage folks to think beyond that trail and use the whole, we have 200 miles of natural service trails and about 70 miles of paved trail. And so find a new trail and think outside of your normal routine. So that would go for folks in our county and our neighbors as well. Yeah.
Great. Anybody else on the panel? Yeah, anyone else have a thought on that?
Yeah, Eric, I just wanted to jump in. It's not a trail and maybe the traditional way we're thinking about it, but from a tourism standpoint, it definitely is. I'm thinking about the tidal basin here in DC, and the cherry blossoms are blooming. And so people kept, and there are little mini trails that go in and around the tidal basin, which are usually packed at this time of year, so people can see the cherry blossoms, and people were not heeding the request to stay away during this time, and it just kept coming and coming and getting worse, and the crowds were really bad. And so ultimately the mayor had the police get involved, and they literally cut off all the ways that you could access that area, and that's just that's what it took to keep people from coming in and visiting that popular spot. So that required a pretty drastic measure.
I know we're getting close. I've got 5 after 3. I've got a question that I do want to ask and give some space for each of our panelists to answer. You all have unique experience, both past and with this difficult situation, and I want to give each of you a chance to answer this question. If you had one message to people who are trying to get out on trails right now, what would that message be? And Gabe, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so sorry, my video cut out there, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. Yeah, so, for us, we've just had a massive influx of people getting outside. I mean, we're like all the panelists have mentioned, it's just having access to the outdoors is super important right now. And while Governor Inslee's stay home, stay healthy order is out there, we know that visitors are still able to walk into parks and backcountry trails, and we just encourage everybody to use common sense to follow those social distancing guidelines. It's just really important, especially doing our part to stop the spread of this virus and help save lives by abiding by the closures that are in place, checking back daily to that blog post that we have, so people can see what the changes are, and really just following those public health guidelines. I think we know that people are going to get out there. We know that people are going to be on our trails, and just really think about others at this time, and just use common sense would be my main thing.
Great. Amy, got some advice?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gabe. I think, you know, our local parks, trails, our open spaces, they've always really served as a place where people can find that respite and find peace and restoration. And we need to continue to push that message for people's physical and mental health. But I think, you know, this is all uncertain times for us. And, you know, these places are needed more than ever right now. And it is a great opportunity for us, you know, and I think all park and rec professionals around the country are really working hard to try and maintain these spaces and continue to keep them safe and accessible, so for the benefit of our communities, right? And I just think that we need to remind everyone that all of us really need to do our part and use them in respectful ways, and to continue to follow the public health guidelines, you know, and continue to use them in a safe manner that allows people to really enjoy the mental and physical health benefits that they provide. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you, Amy. Sean, if you want to pitch in?
Yes, thank you for the softball question, Eric. I think it's just really important for I keep telling my friends this as well, is right now you get to go use the trails and parks. If you abuse it, you're going to lose it. And that's, if this keeps spreading and this keeps getting worse and worse, the executive order is going to read very differently. And so during this time, we're saying, look, bathrooms, water fountains are closed. Maintain a 6-foot distance from other people, no groups, gatherings or meetups, but people from your immediate household can congregate. No picnicking, walking, hiking, running, horseback riding, biking, and fishing is allowed. Be aware of high touch points like you know, handles and gates and parking machines, and use hand sanitizer. Keep dogs on a leash. Actually, right now we're saying keep your dogs on a leash, because I think when you pet dogs, you could get germs that from other people petting. You know, there's things people don't think about. And lastly, we're not collecting trash right now, so it's a strict, you know, pack in, pack out your trash. Really exercise an extreme level of social and personal responsibility right now. And last, I just want to say that clean up your poop bags from your dog. It wasn't okay before the shelter-in-place order. It's not okay now, and it won't be okay after the shelter-in-place order. So that's it. And I just stay healthy and safe, people. And I totally agree with the common sense part of that. This isn't going to be how it is forever. We're going to get through this.
Thank you so much. Darren, did you want to address this last question here?
Yeah, I'll just echo what everybody said. I think, you know, our message is just use good judgment, you know, avoid crowds, step off the path to give people a little extra space, avoid lingering in paths, avoid lingering on bridges. We have a lot of bridges in our Stream Valley Trail network. And so just give people the opportunity to give themselves 6 feet. There are pinch points that we need to avoid, so don't linger at trailheads. You know, follow CDC guidelines about hygiene and hand washing, and plan ahead so you don't necessarily need to use the bathroom, and water fountains, bring your own water. And then the last thing I'll just say is, we call it social distancing, but it's really, that's about the physical distancing. You could still be social, you can still wave, you can still smile, you can still say hello, just do it a little louder. And I think we can still sort of find the joy in our outdoors and the trail network that we're accustomed to.
Wonderful. You know, I'm actually going to direct one last question and see if my colleague Liz will address this, because we've been seeing it both discussed and even implemented in some space, and it came up as a question during the webinar. The idea of closing roads, both I think internal to parks as well as external to parks, as a way to create more space, outdoor space for people. Just that whole concept. Liz, do you want to just take a stab at what we're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, I'm so glad that people are asking that question. We've been tracking it really since this whole crisis started. And so give you guys a little bit of a teaser of what's about to come from RTC. We are about to launch a a series of resources on this topic, hopefully as soon as today, but definitely over the next week. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. But we're going to be elevating those places that have already done it. The first place that I could track that's done it globally in light of the pandemic was Bogota. And then in the US, the first one that we were able to track was Philly, which this was this past weekend on MLK Drive. I know here in DC, I really enjoy Beach Drive, which is in Rock Creek Park, when it closes on the weekends. There's been calls for that here. New York has verbally committed to doing this because they're obviously the densest place in the country, and so it's really important there. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens. And then this morning I saw that Toronto in Canada was going to be doing this as well. So we're about to release some content and resources about this. So hopefully you'll see that and stay tuned. And we'd love for you all to engage in that with us. So we think it's really important, not only for this moment, for everyone to have those safe places to walk and bike and still be 6 feet apart from people outside of their household, but we think that even when this pandemic is over, those connections could perhaps stay in place, could be critical trail connections, part of the connectivity of our active transportation networks. So that's something that we're digging into right now. So please stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Liz. And as we get to closing time here, I just wanted to mention a few other things for everybody. We want to hear from you. You know, what other topics would you like to see Rails to Trails Conservancy cover? We'd like to continue bringing opportunities like this webinar to have a discussion, to bring the community together, to listen from our colleagues around the country and learn from each other, and just have a place to discuss these issues. They're changing on a daily basis, as we heard today from everybody, and as many of you on the webinar are experiencing yourselves. So you could tell us in the chat box right now, are there topics that you want to hear more about? The post-webinar survey that will be sent out to you, by all means, share ideas for future topics that need covering. And we're looking forward to trying to be, get content out to you as much as we can and get relevant content out to you. So help us with that. Also, how is this impacting your trails? Go to railstotrails.org/COVID survey. Please take the survey. We're trying to gather as much data as we can on the impact of this pandemic and your activities, your responsibilities, your jurisdictions. We're trying to gather all that we can to be a service to the trail community. It's going to take a whole country to deal with this, and it's going to take this entire community to deal with this. So help us help you. Any questions? I think we're beyond the questions for time right now, but I really want to thank Amy, Darren, Sean, and Gabe. I know everybody is stretched super thin. Everybody has 1,000 things going on in an environment that was almost unthinkable 2 weeks ago. So thank you for taking the time. I know we had 500 people registered for this webinar. I'm sure that they all thank you for taking the time. It's been wonderful. I appreciate all the panelists. I appreciate the RTC staff. Thank you to Liz and everybody that helped make this happen. And thank you to all of the trail community. You guys are doing, you're doing wonderful work out there. You've never been needed more, and we all recognize that. We're all trail lovers, and we all have friends and family and people who need the outdoor space that we all work on now more than ever. So those of you whose job it is to keep those places safe and open for us, thank you. Thank you to the entire trail community. Rails to Trails Conservancy thanks you, and we look forward to the next chance we have to get together, and all of us look forward to seeing each other on a trail again here very soon.
And then just a friendly reminder, we have built a really wonderful resource page specifically in response to the pandemic with all kinds of great resources on it. So we really encourage you to go there, and we'll be adding to it all the time.